You're listening to Feel the Love, coming to you live from Studio 1A in the beautiful True Story Studios in downtown Tempe.
I am honored to have Jim Seiner here. You are so amazing. I have to say that first and foremost. You're a very talented human being.
I appreciate that. You and my mom, you know?
Oh. So I'm going to talk about, let's talk about your art.
Okay.
When I was, you've been all over the world.
Indeed.
And tell me where your artwork is being placed.
It generally gets placed for spot periods of time. But I've been in the Louvre. It's been shown in Times Square several times. It's been at Miami Scope. And I'm proud to say that it's about to be shown in the World Trade Center in mid-June. So,
really? Tell me about the World Trade Center.
Well, there's an organization that I'm associated with called CME, and you get to submit your work. It gets juried, and then they decide who wins the contest, obviously, and they usually get a free trip to wherever it is.
Wow. Congratulations.
I haven't gotten the free trip yet, but I've always placed, so they've showed my art. And so this time it's going to be in the World Trade Center, which is really kind of cool.
That's like huge. I mean, tell me how you do this.
Well, there's...
Because you got several pieces.
Yes, I do traditional art and I do digital art. What I've known for is digital art. That's the stuff that really attracts attention because it's different, it's new, it's bright colored, it's generally pressed on metal.
Mm-hmm. And that takes a long time for you to do.
Well, it depends. So since the digital art is basically a fractal that's generated by math formulas, if I have something in mind, like say, for instance, a heart.
Which, by the way, is on my book, which is coming out soon, and you are on the cover. Your artwork is on the cover, along with a description of the wonderful person that you are.
I owe you. The heart took me 4 years to come up with a perfectly shaped heart with a math formula that looked 3D, that had the right color tones. And that's atypical. Generally, I'll spend 3-4 hours with some math formulas. The way the software works is it generates random bits, random pictures. You pick the picture that you want to shape and form, and you can create different kinds of, effects. My particular shtick is I like to identify real-world objects that people can, basically identify with. So some of the names of my pieces, the one that was in Louvre is called Apple of My Eye, and if you look at it, you will see an apple in it.
Nice.
Another one that's the best seller is called Saturn, and it looks like Saturn.
Wow. So the one that is displayed here.
Yes, is Apple of My Eye, and that was in the Louvre for about a week. That's
such a great honor.
I thought so. I was pretty thrilled, frankly.
I mean, that's just like the Academy Award of all art, really.
Well, if I had a piece in there for more than a week, then it would be. But that kind of exposure, and the French are quite gifted at art and architecture and dining, and their culture is very, very rich, and to be amongst those kinds of folks, is kind of special. So I view that as, just kind of a cool
And then the
thing.
other artwork is what kind?
It tends to be hand paintings. It ranges from watercolor to oil to acrylic.
Wow.
And most of the hand paintings are either abstract pieces that I love doing, or somebody will ask for something. So I have here a hand painting of a dinosaur, which was commissioned by my granddaughter, who said, "Gramps, can you do me a dino?" And I would really like one. And I said, "I won't charge you."
But you never know where it's going to end up. I mean, because it is beautiful.
Yeah, and what I do is I try to make art affordable, and of course, for my granddaughter, it was very affordable. I will do an art piece, scan it in, and then I can put it on a number of different mediums, either metal or wood or porcelain, and try to keep the cost down because I'm probably selling multiple. Most of my fractals are 1 to 200. My paintings are 1 to 100, so it's generally a series. Now, I haven't broken any of those limits, so, maybe my number's a little high in the series, but, by the time that happens, I'll probably be in the ground because artists are only famous when they're dead.
Well, and unfortunately, that is the true analogy that everybody uses when it comes to art. However, there are so many people that appreciate it because art is an interpretation on what you love.
Mm-hmm.
And how you interpret it, somebody else may get a different perspective from.
That's true. That's true. And in fact, people look at my art at art shows, and I've been involved with a number of pop-up art shows, and I've named it something, and they'll look at it and say, well, that name must be this. And I go, nope, I never thought of that. I'm sorry. So people have different views of the same piece of art. So I have my highest selling piece is one called Virus. But some people say, well, it looks like pollen or it looks like dust.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So people have, they have different perspectives on art, which is kind of cool to look at it through their eyes.
Well, because then with the way that your art is, it attracts everybody. They're
Yeah.
going to find something that they're going to like. And the amount of work that goes into it.
Yeah, and that's in fact the case. I mean, some pieces there's a lot of work, and a lot of the pieces there aren't. So if I'm doing, let's say, a portrait, it might take me 6 months to do a portrait.
Wow.
So I had, when I first started painting, which was about 10 years ago, my wife said, what's in this for me? I said, how about a portrait of your dog or our dog? And she goes, okay, I'm buying that. That one took 6 months. So.
Well, I remember when you were telling me that when you took a class, that the instructor couldn't believe that you hadn't taken an art class.
Yeah, it was one of these interesting art classes that you take at a rec center. And, I hadn't done any art since a teenager, and I did mostly handcrafted things because I really couldn't afford paints when I was younger. And basically, I walked into a coffee clutch. Everybody brought their coffee, they brought their donuts, and they were just kind of like really good friends, and I was serious about learning about how to paint. And they said, oh, a man in an art class? Well, they were kind of shocked at that. And second of all...
then they took a drink of coffee and got over it.
They went back to their buzzing, whatever they were doing. And so there was a painting of a ship, and the instructor said, well, I'll get you set up. This is this kind of brush, this is this kind of brush, and here's some paint. And I said, well, how does this work? She says, you paint that. That's your instruction, paint it. So
That's it?
that was it. So I go like, okay.
That's kind of like broad.
Yeah, well,
I would have been like, okay, can you draw it? Can you just pencil it in and then I'll paint it in? Like paint by numbers. I mean,
well, there are times when you do things like that, but on this one it was kind of a loose painting. So I just started doing the sky, and one by one they came traipsing over and looking over my shoulder and saying, hey, he knows how to mix colors. Oh, he knows how to transition colors. Oh, then the instructor would come by and say, well, if you did this, it'd look a little bit better. So then I'd do it, and that it was kind of like trial and error. And turns out that my first painting that I ever did has sold a dozen times.
well,
which is
there
kinda
you
cool.
go. Yeah. Now, what happens when you're painting? Do you get calm, or is it like a high, like when I teach yoga sometimes, and it's just like it's an indescribable feeling?
Yeah, you get into a zone. There's no doubt about it. But I have two kinds of zones. One is, I'm really kind of bottled up emotion, kind of frustrated, dealing with stress. Then what I'll do is I'll turn on my favorite music, which is usually pretty upbeat. And
Classic rock, by the way.
yeah, generally. And then I'll start painting, and then I'll get in. The music becomes kind of white noise, and it goes in the background. And that's how I write, by the way. But there are other times when I go like, I'm really just kind of relaxed, and I'm going to try something and see if I can create something that just happens to come up, on the top of my mind.
Right.
And that's a different kind of mode. That mode is much different than the white noise induced zone. It's much more of a creative zone.
Well, usually people that are artists are in one or the other. It's very rare that I run into an artist that can do both. I'm just being real honest with you, because most people are like, it's freestyle and that's all there is to it. But with you can do both, which is fantastic.
Well, it comes from admiring art from the Dutch academic period. And they would paint so accurately that it was realistic. It wasn't super realism, but very close. The academic period, when you looked at somebody's portrait, it looks like them. So I really admired that. So that was my end goal. But my creative side wants to do the loose and free things. So I started down the path of doing academic kinds of arts with, 35 layers of gloss over it. But then moved into more creative things, which took less time and were more fun. So, and my background is in analytic, so I had to learn the methodology before I could do the academic.
Why?
Because analytics tend to be a little bit more sequential, a little bit more, let's calculate this, let's figure out all the aspects of it, and so your mind's more engaged. Where when I'm on the creative side in a different zone, there's no analytic going on other than
emotions maybe.
More your emotions. But yeah, if you do this, you're going to drip on the floor and have to pay later with trying to clean it up. So that's the only logic that enters, is like, how much of a mess am I going to make?
Wow. And on top of that, you're a fantastic writer.
I do like to write, yes.
Oh my goodness! You write articles where you're known worldwide, and people are paying for your interpretation. Correct?
Yes. In the books, they pay for them. I do have a free blog.
And what is that blog? Go ahead and say it.
Well, if you look up Jim Siner, JimSinur on Google. And that my persona for the logic side is Jim Siner. If you want to look up my art, my persona is James Siner, JamesSinur. So I have two different personas to find things on Google. But my blog gets consistently 5,000 hits a month.
Wow.
And depending upon the article, the most popular one right now is about 4,000 hits, and it's on what is known as robotic process automation.
Okay.
So the two things that I love to write on are automation, obviously, because that's why the whole IT computing world exists up till now. The other is to basically serve customers. And those two worlds are merging in a better way. So one of the latest articles I wrote was matching customer journeys to company processes. And companies design processes for their outcomes.
Right.
For their efficiency, for their automation.
For the bottom dollar.
For their profit.
For the profit, excuse
Amen.
me.
Yeah, exactly. Same difference.
Right.
And customers want a journey. They want a journey that's a good experience. They want a journey that understands them, understands not just the journey in your company, but their end-to-end journey. If the end-to-end journey is entertainment, well, if you're Cox, there's a certain part of that entertainment, but there's other parts of entertainment other than watching cable.
Right.
So the convergence of company processes and customer journeys is going to be the challenge for digital transformations over the next 25 years. So let's use a real world example that everybody can get their hands around. Do you like shopping at Amazon?
I've had to stop.
Oh, you've had to
because
say it costs too much.
It
Huh?
costs. I'm spending too much money. I mean, I should work for them, and I tried to get a job, but that's a whole different story. But no,
Amazon
you're
has
right.
it has an inductive process that induces you to get involved.
Exactly.
Suggests that you should buy something, and frankly, you can track things from the time you buy them to the time they hit your door, and it's just going to get better. There's an example of a wonderful journey that's just going to get better. Uber is another example of a journey.
Right.
Taxis were kind of rude, crude.
Right.
And
now Uber, you get to rate them before. You get to rate them to find out what your experience is. And in Uber, the higher your rating, the more people you will attract to hire you to take you from place to place.
Exactly. And they come to you instead of you going to the taxi stand. And so, I've traveled a lot of miles in my life, about 6 million air miles. And so you've taken a lot of taxis. And Uber in highly dense populations is the way to go. If you're in New York, you're in San Francisco, why don't they have them come to you and let them worry about it? And, there's some issues with this new kind of journey. They didn't, not everybody's certified to be safe, and they're starting to work on that. But
Right.
the journey, it was designed around the journey. What does the traveler want to do? How do you identify what the car is? You can even, have a higher level of Uber, Black Uber, which allows you to get higher level cars if you're into that. I'm personally not.
Well, and the thing with Uber and Lyft is when they started the company, their main focus was transportation. They never imagined that it would become unsafe, whether it be for the driver or the
Exactly.
passenger. And as a company, sometimes you do not look at that angle
Right.
until after the fact, and at the time that they're drawing up, well, this is what I want the company to do, and at the time that's what you're focused on.
Yeah. And frankly, they started off with the great idea of let's make it a better journey. And there are exceptions they didn't think about, but that's okay. You learn, you grow, and that's true of any kind of system or organization. Another example is Rocket Mortgage
Yes, from Quicken Loan.
from Quicken Loan. Not many people know the Quicken Loan part. Most people think Rocket Mortgage because what they did is they took their old kind of crunchy systems and they put a front end on it that was friendly to people that were doing mortgages. And so they came up with a customer journey that is very well known, very well liked, but there's even a bigger journey. And an Irish bank has figured this one out, and that is buying a home.
Right.
And so the bigger journey is buying a home.
Right.
A minor journey
Is the Quicken Rocket
is the-
that you
is the
can
loan.
get approved. The loan is not
Exactly.
going to be painful anymore.
Exactly. But people that are really creative in this world are looking for journeys that are saying, I'm buying a house. So they start giving you information about what's in the neighborhood, what kind of schools are there, what's the crime rate. They'll overlay all of that. They'll make suggestions based on your budget. They'll they'll do the pre-finances and suggest neighborhoods that fit your culture.
Right.
So you could put in there, I'm an artsy-fartsy person.
It's an actual down. It's actually down to a science, down to statistical numbers.
Exactly. And it's because the Irish banks were going out of business in 2008, and they said, boy, we better come up with a better journey, or we're not going to be in business at all. So in the case of Rocket Mortgage, they were doing okay, and Quicken was doing okay. They just wanted to draw it away from their competitors. So it was a different reason, but either way, it's a better journey. And I think the world is headed to a better journey. And it'll be a more immersive journey. You'll see, banks being coffee shops. We see that an ad for, I believe it's Citibank or Capital One, that's showing that
Yes.
it's the experience. And if we want to reach the younger people,
Yes, that are attached to their phone.
and they're attached to their experience, and it better be fun, and it better be mellow, and it better be it's all good.
Yeah.
And the way most companies treat you, it's like, you're going to do it my way or the highway.
Right.
I don't care about your goals. I don't care about how you feel.
Right.
Just give me the money.
Right. And what's amazing is that the companies now are actually having to change in the sense of marketing the next client. I can't think of the name of the bank. I think where they have the horses running, and at that time that they ran the commercial, everybody loved it, but now nobody can relate to it because it was back in the old days, and the younger people can't relate to that.
Right.
Well, why would I ride a carriage and horses pulling me when I can get an Uber?
Exactly.
So the companies are now forced to change the way they advertise and market to attract customers.
Exactly.
And that includes being able to pay with your phone, being able to, like you said, enjoy the experience. And if they don't, then they have to remarket and redo, which leads back to your article where companies are having to think just above and beyond the bottom dollar.
Yeah, and the existing processes that are legacy and they're stuck with and they don't want to change. So if you go to any governmental organization, you'll find most of them are pasting a web front end, on a bunch of clunky old systems. Mm-hmm. There are exceptions, but I just had to deal with the court system recently, and that's what it was. You go to the web and it tells you what to do, and all of a sudden you get into the internals of doing this right, or that right, and filling this out the right way, and all of a sudden you get into the deep, dark, dank corners of their system. And I managed to wind up in one of those corners, and finally somebody said, well, here's the real journey you need to take. And it was somebody explaining to me. And what a lot of companies...
They should do that at the beginning, though, instead of you having to be on that journey for God knows how many hours just to figure things out.
Yeah, they should show me a journey map of a typical person that's in this situation. Here are the steps you're going to take. But instead, what they say is work with my systems and then figure it out yourself.
Right.
There's going to be a sea change where people are going to mine the journeys and show people the journeys ahead of time and give them a lot of visibility as to where things are. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a huge shift. It's going to take 20 years.
And you're going to be a part of it.
As long as I'm on the green side of the grass, I hope.
Well, yeah, because of your wonderful articles.
My articles, which is going to turn into a book. We're penning a book right now with some co-authors about customer experience excellence programs.
Now, how are you getting the data for that? I mean, are you interviewing? Are you getting a perspective from the employment side, or are you doing all of the above?
Well, you have to do everything. So you've got to look at case studies. I mean, to me, real-world experience is what drives reality and drives the future. We listen to the theoreticians. We listen to the vendors that are selling journey mapping and journey mining tools. We have personal experience delivering systems, so I've delivered them some pretty sizable systems for American Express and Northwestern Mutual Life and Ware Steel. So there's personal experience baked into this, and there's 3 authors, all of which have had different backgrounds. And so that all gets baked in. We'll probably do surveys, we'll do presentations, and we're going to do the book in a phased approach. We're going to have version 1. And we expect to get feedback, and
that's going to lure them in for the next version.
Well, that's part of the marketing idea, but the reality-based idea is that now we're going to get feedback from people about the book.
Right.
But before we do the book, we're doing blog posts to get some of that feedback. So if I write something about the convergence of process and journeys, somebody can get out on my blog and say, well, yeah, I think you got it kind of wrong.
Oh,
so
okay.
My blog posts usually reach about 100,000 sets of eyes.
Oh, my God.
Not everybody clicks through to read the content. Sometimes they just look at the picture and say, oh, that's a cool picture.
Okay.
So
they don't get the full See, they don't get the full picture, though. You need to be able to enjoy the whole thing.
Well, it just may give them what they want at the moment, and they come back and read it later.
Oh, okay.
So, you have a couple of
Right.
pieces in front of you. One shows you a customer pain index that shows from green to red the different kinds of pains and the kinds of systems that create pain versus those that don't. And so they'll look at that graphic and they'll say, that's cool. That gave me something. I'll use that. Others that say, well, look, I want to, look at this a little deeper, and then they'll read the blog post.
So when you write your blogs, do you have the music in the background?
Mostly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you referring to anything, or are you just letting it go from your fingertips? I mean, how does the process work?
Oh, boy. It's different every time.
Really?
Yeah. Sometimes you have a nugget of an idea.
Sorry.
You have a little nugget of an idea, and then you let it grow. You feed it by writing, and then all of a sudden you'll turn it upside down saying, oh, I was kind of approaching that the wrong way. There's other things where you've come up with the title, and you know the end game, and you kind of work your way backwards.
Okay.
So it depends on what kind of writing is. It's more of an adventurous journey approach versus, I've really got an end game. I know this is solid. I know this is going to...
And technical.
And it's going to get hits. So if you put something, let's say, out on LinkedIn, it'll likely to get thousands of hits. The blog, in turn, will get 400 to 500
Wow.
initially. But over time, it could be thousands as well because people come back to it, particularly if it's written well and they like it.
And you are a good writer.
I take a little bit of pride in being able to summarize very complex things for the average person because I believe I'm an average person, so I've got to write for myself.
I don't know about that, but okay. I mean, okay, so you're also doing an article on gaining advantage by combining journeys and processes, which you just went over just a little bit. So when you write these, do you have like, okay, I only need to do a certain amount of words, or do you write it and then you go back and review it and edit it? I'm sure that's what you do. But.
Well, it depends. Sometimes I start off with a picture in my mind, being an artist.
Right.
So this one started with a picture.
With the steps?
Yeah, with the steps
Okay.
and the two paths converging to the middle, saying over time these two things are going to converge. So in my mind, I had a picture.
Okay.
Other times, I don't have a picture. So you have in your right hand the
Right.
predictions for 2019 for digital.
Oh,
That
okay.
was one there was no picture. It was just like, these are the things that I'm seeing happening. This is a trend. What happens is you read, I read a lot, and then you read and certain things stick. And then those themes start reoccurring. You say, well, if I'm thinking this, maybe others are.
Right. And so
So-
you bring it forward.
So I bring it forward, I summarize it, I make it concise, digestible within 10 to 15 minutes or less, and then it generally generates some more conversation, which generates more articles, which generates more downstream.
And you're not working. You're retired, right?
Yeah.
Okay. This is what you got to look forward to, people.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
But this is fun for you.
It is. It's, if you believe in Maslow, there's this hierarchy of need, and at the top is where you're being very creative. But I mean, I'm not doing all of this for free, so
Right, you're getting paid,
I make
too.
money for
And your artwork, too.
yeah. But the biggest primary thing is giving speeches at conferences.
Nice. And where go ahead and do your kudos. I want to know where you have spoken.
All over the world, but
Nice.
I do a lot of things in Vegas because that's now a destination for a lot of conferences. Do things in San Francisco since that's Silicon Valley.
And now, is it all about the digital trends?
A lot of it is there are two things that are going on: automation and the customer journey. A lot of the automation happens over in Europe.
Oh, okay.
And also in Silicon Valley and also the East Coast. I'm going to a conference this coming week from a company that I knew them when they were 15 million in size. They are now $1 billion, and they do process management around customer journeys. And so in this case, I'm going to be all ears, and being the ears and eyes of my blog audience, and I'll write a blog post about them.
Nice.
But I've spoken for these guys before.
And are you able to tell them, you know what, you're on a good journey. Your company's doing great, but let me just tell you, this is what you need to do to perform better. And it's not a slap in the face. It's just a nice way of saying, you know, I have experience in this, and let me help you. Is that correct?
That's where I make my money, yes. They'll bring me in and say, hey, look, we know you've given other companies advice, and it made them grow. So please give us some advice. And that's usually behind the scenes.
Right.
On the blog post.
Like a consultant.
Exactly.
Right.
So in the blog post, I try to tend to be kinder, because it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Right. Because then you get repeat customers. If you trash one company, then they're going to say, well, what are you saying about these other companies? So you have to be professional at every given time.
Exactly. And I do a lot of head-to-head comparisons, vendor X versus vendor Y.
And does it really come down to the customer satisfaction in the journey? Do you really think so? Because I do.
Yeah, bottom line it does, but for the companies, they haven't quite bought it yet. They're still thinking about their stock price.
And you've got to change that. But when they're in it for the money, you've got to change their mindset.
Yep.
And it's challenging because all they're thinking about is the bottom dollar. I need to make money. I need to make profit. How am I going to do this? Like, for example, Geico ads. They're hilarious. But I've heard their customer service is awful. But everybody knows a Geico commercial.
Right. So they're selling the brand.
Exactly.
Versus selling the product and service versus selling the experience. Mm-hmm. The really good companies get all of them right.
Such as Amazon.
So, Amazon's well on its way, in my opinion.
But they're like in the infancy stage. Would you say that?
Well, yeah. I mean, eventually someday you'll have robots and drones delivering stuff to your house, and you'll know exactly where it is.
Wow. So which company do you think is top that is practicing the true customer satisfaction? Are you allowed to say?
Well, no, it's I can't think of any that meet my kinds of standards yet. I mean, there are companies that are well on their way, like Tesla and Uber,
right.
and Lyft, and Amazon. I don't think we've reached to the point. So my idea of that is whatever channel a customer comes through, whether it's phone or whether it's through a mobile device, mm-hmm. or whether it's online on their computer or it's face-to-face, the customer should get an assist. Now, when it's face-to-face, the people are trained well and they help you. Unless, they have a bad personality or you have a bad personality, most of the time you're able to work it out. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you were a customer that's coming online and you had a bot that would talk to you and help you and make and suggest things to you.
Now, is that suggestion so that you can upscale the product that you're going to buy, or is that simply to make the experience better? In your perspective,
it should be both.
It should be both, but trying to get both things together is the challenging part for companies.
Yeah, smart companies know what their goals are. And there are a lot of smart companies that know what their own goals are. And frankly, that's why they built the systems the way they did. Smart companies know the customer's goals. They know all the personas that are out there. So each persona, which is a type of customer, mm-hmm. not just, it's how they feel, how they act, what generation they're from, what their expectations are. Because my expectation is different than yours.
Exactly. And that's based on how you grew up. That's based on
your culture.
Mm-hmm. Your experiences. And even if you had, for example, if you're selling coffee, for some people, that's going to bring back a painful memory, and for some people, it's going to bring back a pleasant memory.
And that's why it's important to know your customer and collect information without bugging them to key it in.
Now, how do you do that?
You watch them.
So
You watch them.
on the web, on what they click on, or what, or all of
Clicks
the
is one way,
above? Okay.
but you watch their journey and watch what they do when they go down certain, and you watch for patterns and personas. So you can aggregate people into personas. So part of the journey is to find the moment of truth for each persona type. Where are the touch points into your organization? How do those personas behave? What is the moment of truth? How much is your part of the journey impacting the whole end-to-end journey? And most companies don't look at the end-to-end journey
Why?
because they're concentrating on their specialties, their products.
A niche.
Yes, exactly. So, for instance, you and I might think that going out and buying a car is, in fact, the name of the game. We want to go buy a car. There's a process around that. Dealers help us, etc. But imagine, and they're getting better at that. They'll tell you when to maintain your car. They'll even give you free maintenance just to make sure it happens, because their product's reputation depends on how
Right.
products hang together.
Right. Is it Vasa that sells the cars now, where you actually just you pick out what you want, and it's on the drive home on the freeway. It's such a beautiful building that all it is a click away.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I have. In fact, my
I think I've got the wrong name though. Maybe
yeah,
I'm
it
wrong.
is the wrong day. I think it's called Carvana.
Carvana. Yeah, I mean,
My daughter bought one that way.
and
And
what was
she-
her full end customer
Well,
experience?
her customer experience was great because her goals were, I mean, she's a very high-end executive
Okay.
that's involved with recruiting. The poor person doesn't, my daughter doesn't have any time. She's got kids and
Right.
dogs. And
Right.
so she said, for me, the goal is save me time.
Right.
So Carvana was perfect for her because she could pick out her car online and
Right.
then deliver it to her house.
Isn't that amazing though?
And then she gets to live with it for 10 days. She sent 2 of them back because she didn't like them.
Wow.
And so that's a little bit more expensive for Carvana to do that, but she was willing to pay that extra price for
Right.
that convenience.
And what about IKEA? Because the magnetism they have out here is mind blowing. I mean, it's almost like a warehouse. To me, it reminds me of Amazon, but where you can walk in, and they're not American-made products.
Yeah. And admit you love the meatballs, and that's the only reason you go.
Or the breakfast.
Yeah,
the
or
breakfast.
Yeah.
There's one of them, the breakfast. I can't think of it. That everybody sometimes just goes for that. I mean, they've been very well known for that.
Yeah, well, they're known for that experience. So they draw you in with the food and the experience.
Right.
They show you your furniture in context, and there's personas to those rooms. And anybody can buy furniture that looks, high scale and put it together and basically come away with a decent bargain and have a good time at the same time. I mean, there's not an IKEA on my side of town.
Right.
Otherwise, I'd spend more time there.
Right. But it's, I think that's one company that is
They get it.
utilizing. They get it.
Yeah.
And that's why they make so much money,
And
because they are concerned about the customer.
And that's typical of European companies.
Oh, okay.
That's typical of Nordic countries, and it's particularly important to the Swedes and to the Finns.
Really?
Yeah, they have this, I want to have a great experience kind of thing, and it's high quality. We want fiber. We want our culture to speak for us,
Right.
not just our products.
And they're proud of their culture.
Oh, big time.
Where I can't necessarily say that about some American companies.
Yeah, and I've worked for companies that were mutual companies where they weren't incented by stock price, and it was more around consensus and the fiber and the fun It was called Mother Mutual at one time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it was a mother taking care of all their employees, all their customers.
And how did they do?
They did very well.
Are they still doing well?
They're doing well.
So they get it.
Yeah, they do. And I learned about good culture from that company. But I worked for another company, and I won't mention their name.
Well, tell me about the good culture first.
Oh, sure. The good culture assumes that everybody has something to offer.
Including the employees.
All the employees.
Okay.
And that the customers have a lot to offer. So let's come up with something that pleases everybody. And let's give people that are on the line assists when they ask for it. So we wrote some artificial intelligent bots that would help underwriters underwrite. And so that helped them do their job, but it also allowed doctors to push down some complex work to very low-level people. Because now you're having knowledge bots giving knowledge to people that were underwriting. It was a life insurance company.
Well, USAA.
Excellent reputation.
Well, the reason why I like them is because they allow they empower the employees to determine the customer's journey, and because they're so honest, they just automatically sell their products. It's not work to sell their products, and they stand behind their name. And it's not just because it's directed towards veterans. It's the fact that they stand behind their product. When we had the hailstorm a couple of years ago,
1996.
the first people that I saw coming into town was USAA.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And they're not pushing like, well, you know what, Irma, you'd be better with this life insurance at this amount. They allow the customer to open up.
Yeah. And by the way, I worked on a competitive benchmark that were benchmarking companies for the good things that they did. And USAA was one of them. Coca-Cola was another. UPS was another. FedEx was another.
But then you have to look at the bad ones.
We found some. Yeah, I won't mention their names.
Right. No, I understand. But are the bad ones willing to learn, or are they already on their own journey that they're too far down and it's hard for them to come back?
Well, it comes down to me, it comes down to pride and humbleness. So if you're a very prideful organization, you think your product's superior, people ought to buy it. And if they're not buying it, you beat on your employees to get more sales, and you beat on them to come up with a better product, and you beat on them to have better service, because how in God's name could you not want to buy from us and deal with us?
But people pick up on that.
They do, and the newer generations aren't taking it, frankly. But there are other business people that say, you know, we've got a really good product, but it's got to get better. It's got to appeal to more people. It's got to reach different kinds of segments that I didn't think about before. We're starting to see on TV, I just saw something this morning that was kind of cool. Fashion for people that are wheelchair bound. I mean, that's a segment that the fashion industry didn't think about even 6 months ago.
Right.
So the notion of the humbleness to learn. We've taught
it's huge.
We've taught our CEOs to be a bunch of, I know better,
right,
kind of strong individuals with great vision. And so they know better, and everything comes and trickles down from them, versus the networking approach that says, together we can collaborate and come up with something that includes collaborating with your customers, your employees, and really smart companies do some of their journeys through talking to employees, because they have to deal with things on a day-to-day basis. So
because when you're in upper management, you don't necessarily get the whole picture.
You don't have time.
Right. You're too busy running the bottom line.
And there are a lot of things that are coming at you. The average,
you're extinguishing one fire to another because you're taking care of major things.
Right. And you can only give something a minute or two. instead of studying it. So, the companies that listen and where any news can travel up, bad, good, or indifferent, are the ones that are more successful. And that mutual company did that. I worked for another company that I would describe the culture as New York Mafia style, where only good news would come up, and if you brought up bad news, you paid for it.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
Was that in Chicago? No, I'm just teasing.
Yeah, this is New York.
I'm just teasing. Well, there's two different mafias in each of those states. No,
Yeah,
I'm teasing.
exactly. Yeah.
So when the companies hire you, they have got to be open to be able to accept what you're about to tell them. Is that correct? Because you're not going to just tell them what they want to hear.
Well, as a consultant, I can't. If there's got to be some people in a room that hate me by the time I leave.
Oh, really?
There has to be. If that's the case, then I'm just stroking them and
Right.
collecting money. I'm just as bad as the people that I'm trying to change.
Right. And how do they react to that? Do they say, don't ever come back here again? Or do they say, thank you for your time? And
Well, if you're a believer and it's not what you say, it's how you say it, you try to draw them into seeing it themselves. And sometimes there's some people that are outliers that aren't. So some of it is asking the right questions. Some of it is psychology. But I, even if they say, well, I don't want me back, I just say, hey, look, there was not a fit here. It's just like, you teach yoga classes, and, I'm in the beginner's class. You wouldn't dare put me in, an advanced class because I'd slow you down. So, there's horses for courses, and, some people aren't interested in you and what you have to offer. I mean, if your margins are really low because, you're selling sugar or you're selling stamps or something that is highly automated, has no people at all, and it's a commodity environment, it's all about cost, then you hire yourself a really strong operations manager and a bunch of really crafty accountants and make the company go. But I think that culture has permeated other kinds of companies, and that needs to change.
well, and it takes a lot for people to be able to want to change.
Indeed.
But
Indeed.
I am so glad that you came and spent some time with me. And I look forward to visiting your blog and continue to see your artwork throughout the valley and throughout the world. And remember to be kind to each other.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Nice. Oh, my